Roll. Hi, everybody. This is Chris Phillips, the founder of the international grassroots movement, Socrates Cafe, where tens of thousands of people regularly get together to inquire in questions as timely as they are timeless. Our website, socratescafe.com. And the idea is to bring people together, very diverse perspectives, and help them discover uncommon common ground. And my guest today, for the third time, it's such an honor to have back Jeffrey Sachs, a world-renowned economist, professor at Columbia University, where Jeff, one of your colleagues, Cornell West, is on our advisory board. And well, there's so much to go into. I'm just going to leave it at there for now. Best-selling author, educator. Jeff, I actually consider you something of a philosopher. Would that be unfair?
Well, I'm a lover of philosophy, so I'm a philo philosopher, I guess.
I like
Yes,
that.
I am. I consider myself an Aristotelian, so Aristotle is my guy. But I think we really need the philosophical insights to get through where we are right now. I realized how unbelievably narrow and strange are the philosophical bases of modern economics. It took me a while to understand that. Uh, Basically, the economics that I was taught and that I did teach for a long time is part of a British philosophical offshoot dating roughly from 1600 to 1800. Pretty weird, actually. And we need to go back to deeper classical roots, including uh, Aristotle, including Buddha, including Confucius, including ancient wisdom, because
Right.
we took some strange detours. So, yes, I consider myself a big fan of philosophy.
So when did you really sort of come to this epiphany? Has it been of late? I mean, that you sort of recognize that we need to move forward, we need to step back and look at some ancient traditions that traditionally these days are left by the wayside.
I would say it's roughly a decade, because more than a decade ago, I had read very little of the Greeks. I knew just a smidgen. I was trained with no philosophical reading in PhD program. And by the way, modern PhD in economics does not read one page of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, or just about
My
anyone
heart,
else.
my heart.
No, just about anyone else before, I'd say, roughly 1980, because even reading Adam Smith is considered, reading the ancients. And one of the tricks that Karl Marx played on our thinking is that he labeled Adam Smith as the classical economist, and this was really a terrible misnomer because it said that economics begins in 1776 rather than beginning, say, in 330 BC with
Yeah.
the Nicomachean Ethics. So
Okay.
there's a lot of mistraining,
Hmm.
complete neglect.
Right.
Maybe you read a page of Hobbes,
Right.
maybe by some miracle you read the Leviathan, but that's a very strange book, by the way,
Yes.
from a philosophical point of view.
Right.
And the whole British tradition, which is Hobbes, Locke, Hume, Smith, is quite strange when considered in the long haul of even
Right.
Western philosophical history. So it
Right.
took me a long time to recognize that. I got involved a bit with the Catholic social teachings a decade ago, though I'm not Catholic myself. I was Jewish and was born into Jewish culture. But reading the Catholic social teachings immediately brings you back to first Aquinas, and then from Aquinas back uh, to Aristotle, and
Mm.
then you say, "Whoa, that's interesting. There are some
Mm.
really important insights in that."
Mm.
And from then, I started educating myself from things that I should have been educated in
Mm.
40 years ago.
I see a book here.
I'm working on it.
No, because my tradition is from Socrates and the pre-Socratics, and Socrates wrote about estate planning, philosophies of fortune and wealth, and it's amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing, you can get a PhD in philosophy. You can get a PhD without reading any of this. You can get a PhD in psychology without reading any original works of Freud. But we
Exactly.
yeah. So we got to go back. So Jeff, before we even talk about your nomadic adventures this year, Greece has about 6,000 islands. And I write in my book, Soul of Goodness, with a foreword by this guy named Cornel West, who's been my dear friend
Yes,
for years and years.
indeed. Our both our dear friends.
So
Yes.
Jeff, my family, and I write about this history in Soul of Goodness, is from this tiny island, volcanic island, active volcano in the South Aegean called Nisyros.
Of course,
And
we
you were
spent
you were
we
there.
spent a couple of weeks walking along the volcanic crater
I
and
almost fell out of
dealing.
my desk
But the
when Sonia
mayor,
told me.
of course, the mayor was in the engineering school at Columbia.
I simply can't believe it.
Yes, and by the way, the Nasiran community is, as you know, very heavily represented in New York City because a lot of Nasiros young people went to
Yes.
New York
The
after World
Nasirian
War II.
Society. Yes.
Exactly, and so we had
Well,
a
my
wonderful
cousin
time.
Anthula Katsimatidis, they wrote a. I got my Greek citizenship because they wrote the Nasirian Society of New York wrote this beautiful letter about me and my family and about why Christopher Phillips needs to be made a Greek citizen. I'm second generation.
You are lucky.
I'm
Wow.
very lucky.
Yeah,
Land of my yayas, my Greek grandmother in Nisos. But why were you in Nisos?
we were at Niceros because the mayor wants to make Niceros a center of sustainable development. And he was a professor at Columbia in earth engineering, basically, for quite a while, then went back and has been a hugely popular mayor for many, many years. And he invited us for a gathering on Niceros, and we had a fantastic time. And of course, anytime we can go to Greece, we do, because it's a wonderful, wonderful place. And we just got back from Greece just recently because I co-hosted a symposium called the Aristotle Confucius
I
Symposium.
know. I couldn't believe
Uh,
it.
yes, and that was at the Academy of Athens, and we worked together with the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and the Confucius Institute in
Unbelievable.
China, and had an absolutely wonderful time. And I
Mm,
did my usual walk around the Lyceum, Aristotle's first university. We went to
mm.
Stagira, which I love to do. We went to Mieza, where Aristotle taught Alexander the Great, and uh, had an absolutely wonderful time.
Do you, well, another place that you went to was Australia, where I earned my PhD there. And you talked about, let's see, it was that you gave a speech to SHAPE, Saving Humanity and Planet Earth. And
Right.
it's a striking statement to say my country, the United States, is unrecognizable. And, when I went to Australia to study and was able to sort of have some distance from my country, and this is 13 years ago when I got my PhD, I sort of felt the same way, and that was 13 years ago. But it didn't exactly, it's not a feel good statement.
No, I'm not feeling too good about U.S. foreign policy right now. And I don't think anybody can feel very good about U.S. politics right now. Our political system was hacked, is how I put it. We have a structure. We have our three branches of government. We have a Congress that is organized in a particular way. And around 50 years ago, it was really hacked by political campaign contributions and done a dirty trick by Lewis Powell, who was a corporate lawyer working with the Chamber of Commerce, who had the idea that it was time for the corporates to fight back against environmental controls and other consumer control regulation, and to fight back and take over power. Nixon appointed him to the Supreme Court, and Powell wrote the decisions that said corporate money in politics is free speech. And with that basis, culminating in Citizens United, basically our political system got handed over to the highest bidders. And the joke is, for $10 billion, you can buy $10 trillion of control over the US economy. And that's what's happened. It's become utterly corrupted. And our foreign policy has basically been taken over by the military-industrial complex. That's that neck of the woods. The military-industrial complex doesn't bother so much with healthcare, which is taken over by the big insurance companies. They don't deal so much with finance because that's in control of Wall Street. They don't deal that much with the agriculture sector because that's big food. But basically, all of the different dimensions of our economic life have been sold to the highest bidder, and the bidding isn't even that high. It's a $10 to $15 billion cost of the political cycle, but it's enough to buy these politicians. And we got stuck, and we've got a terribly dangerous foreign policy because it's in the hands of basically arms manufacturers and those who go along with that, and that's included Biden his whole career. So we're in a hot war with Russia right now, and we're pretty actively in that war, on the ground, in the airplanes, very dangerous, and we're heading towards a war with China if we don't change course. So you can't really be very happy with any of this.
No, but you also talk about you give a scathing critique of the media and how it's basically, in your estimation, a mouthpiece of a lot of these things, that there's lack of nuance, lack of that Socratic skeptical sensibility.
Well, I take it very personally because I read the New York Times from my youth, and it's unreadable right now. Yeah, it's some combination between just pablum, something about what to do, in Midtown on a Saturday, and then baloney about everything else that counts. We hear no skepticism at all. And our government's in the business of lying. This is obvious. This is not even a close call. It's not even mysterious. Governments lie for a living right now because they're in the power business. They're trying to stay in power. So did they tell the truth about Nord Stream? Of course not. Did they tell the truth about the origins of the war in Ukraine? Of course not. Have they told the truth about NATO enlargement? Of course not. Have they told the truth about the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, included with a lot of US participation in 2014? Of course not. None of it's covered. And and it just goes on like this day by day. Yeah. And interestingly, for me, when Nord Stream pipeline was blown up, I said, well, the US almost surely did that.
Yeah, you got hit by that. You got censored a little bit.
Or a US ally did it, but with US knowledge. Actually, the US now says it was the Ukrainians, but then they don't care at all about the implication of that. But in any event, when I said it to a lead New York Times columnist. He said to me, Jeff, of course they did. And I said, why don't you write that in your newspaper instead of blaming it on the Russians? He said, the editor, they're just not interested in that. This is life and death issues treated with such profound, if you could say it, it's an oxymoron. I was going to say such profound superficiality, just such complete superficiality. It's terrible.
Well, I became a dad late in life. I have a just turned 10-year-old and a soon to be 17-year-old daughter. And I wonder and I worry, what am I bringing them into? Honestly, it seems like if we could just condense in a nutshell what you're trying to do, it's to prevent nuclear war.
Of course. This first, we want to make sure that our children and grandchildren are surviving and have a chance even to thrive so that they're not living in a world of environmental ruin as well. There are no fundamental obstacles to creating quite a nice world right now with all the know-how that we have, with all the technology that we have, with the digital resources, which could be a great boon for telemedicine or online education or so many other things that are for the good. Mm-hmm. And yet we cannot seem to overcome these primitive structures, failed institutions, corrupted politics, and war or threat of war 24/7. So this is really the biggest problem. The good news is there is actually not even a fundamental or even a very costly barrier to a green power system, a green energy system that would stop the relentless human-caused warming, which is everywhere evident every single day in every part of the world right now. We could do that. And each one of our objectives, protecting biodiversity, stopping the destruction of the rainforests, we could do all of that. We could stop the war in Ukraine if we had a minute of honesty. And Biden hasn't had a minute of honesty about this war, because from the beginning, from the 1990s, he was in favor of reckless NATO enlargement. In 2008, he supported the push to Ukraine and Georgia, even though that was an absolute red line, understandably so, for Russia. In 2014, he participated in the overthrow of the Yanukovych government. In 2021, he rejected any diplomacy to avoid this war. In 2022, he blocked a negotiated agreement between Russia and Ukraine, but no accountability. You can look in vain for the New York Times or any of the other mainstream media to explain any of the basics about this.
Well, that's why your essays remind me. I ended up getting my bachelor's at College of William and Mary in government rather than philosophy, because I love the political philosophers in the government. But my point is, your essays today have a nuance and a texture, and they put things in a historical perspective that we're hard put to find almost anywhere.
And well, it's just connecting the dots, because if I've been involved little, bits and pieces over 30 years in this, and you can trace step by step. Could we behave properly? But the truth is that so much is hidden from view. Let me give you one example. In 2008, we know it now, thanks to Assange and WikiLeaks, that the U.S. ambassador to Moscow, William Burns, who's now the CIA director, wrote a long, smart, correct cable back from Moscow. Niet means niet, referring to the cross the board, cross the political class Russian opposition to expanding NATO to Ukraine. Now, what's interesting about the memo is, first, it explains, don't do that. It's just absolutely throwing gasoline on a fire. Do you want to do something completely reckless? Don't do it. So that's the first point. Second point, as is so typical of government, the memo was confidential, top secret. We're not supposed to see it. Are we a democracy? No, not really, because the public is kept from being properly informed.
Mhm.
So how do we even see the memo? Because WikiLeaks leaked the memo.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we wouldn't even know about the memo.
Mhm.
This is what's
Right.
disgusting, by the way. Just
But
disgusting. And then when it's known, who analyzes it?
mhm.
Who The whole purpose of the mainstream media, it seems right now, is to keep our attention away
Mhm.
from these basic facts.
Well, I found myself wondering, what if we'd had WikiLeaks during the days of the Gulf of Tonkin, when we had to launch the Vietnam War out of
What Yeah, what I find amazing, we had Daniel Ellsberg,
Ellsberg.
thank goodness, photocopying and at great personal risk releasing the Pentagon Papers, which explained in thousands of pages the systematic lying of the government.
And at that time, the New
And
York Times actually came out with some stuff.
that's the New York Times I knew, which is they put it in the headlines
Mhm.
and they analyzed it and it made a difference and it helped end the Vietnam War. But now, would they ever do this? I don't think in a million years they would do
Hmm.
it. They lost completely the sense of their responsibility.
So to say this makes me sad as a citizen and as a dad, but I have to have hope somehow, because I have young kids. I have to, and I'm wondering. So for instance, you make a call for public deliberation, honest public deliberation. But when the facts are kept from us, even by those who could get them from, like the New York Times, how do we have these public deliberations when we're thwarted to get the basic information that we need?
We're halfway there in that the mainstream media is basically closed right now, but alternatives like our discussion right now is becoming more and more important. Now, it's still true. The New York Times has a larger website and a larger viewing, but what I'm sensing is the deep skepticism that the public has about the main
Mm-hmm.
outlets, the search for something different, the absolute incredibility of the government. So every opinion survey shows the American people just don't believe what they're told.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very healthy reality, actually, because
Mm-hmm.
what they're being
Mm-hmm.
told is false. And
Mm-hmm.
so, of course, that doesn't lead to where we need to get by itself, but it is halfway there. It's not as if the government is telling these lies and people are believing it. The government is telling the lies and people are not believing in it. So they're looking for ways to find the truth. Now, I have to say, you have to spend a lot of time finding valuable websites, finding good discussions. It's not simple.
Mm-hmm.
There's not one place to get information right now. Even if
Mm-hmm.
you're like I am as an academic network throughout the world, I generally can turn to friends and hear a lot of things or
Mm-hmm.
colleagues and so forth. But systematically finding the information is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is our big problem. We're still, I think, still forging the way
Mm-hmm.
to hold our politics
Mm-hmm.
accountable right now because it is
Right.
not accountable.
I mean, you still do exchanges. I felt like the New York Times. No, no. I felt like the New Yorker interview with you was almost, except for it was almost a hit piece. The guy
Of course it
wasn't.
was.
It wasn't critical, skeptical. He had an agenda, and he was gonna. He wasn't even listening to you. You
Look,
know.
that particular guy, Isaac Chotiner, is so unprincipled.
But you still
Uh,
went on with him. I admired that.
no, because look,
Mm-hmm.
he wrote and I canvassed people and they said the guy, most of the people said the guy's a jerk. He'll do whatever hit piece he can on you. I said, okay, let him try. I need to talk and try to reach people. And it was so irresponsible of him from the beginning till the end, putting just absurd and ignorant, by the way. The guy's ignorant and obnoxious at the same time. So, okay, what can you do? My feeling is I'm ready to talk and to try to explain and to give my
Right.
point of view, even to a guy like that.
Right. So even about a year and a half ago, my blood started boiling when I saw like the Atlantic Monthly. They said, "What is Jeff Sachs doing weighing in on these things? He's an economist."
You know, I've advised 3 secretaries general of the UN. I've been involved with well over 100 governments in this world. I've seen more, heard more, happened to have been an economic advisor to Gorbachev, Yeltsin, Kuchma, happened to have been a close observer of many of the key events involving Russia and Ukraine. I
Mm-hmm.
know a lot about this. So I'm going to talk about it. I don't care
Mm-hmm.
what the Atlantic Monthly says, for heaven's sake.
Okay, Jeff. There's like a billion other things I want to talk to you about. Work with indigenous groups in Colombia. I'm sort of following you. I'll be going to Brazil, where we have Socrates Cafe groups everywhere in that vast country. Um,
Fantastic.
but this is we'll have to. Can I say to be continued?
Of course. By the way, we
Yes.
were in Belém earlier this year at the at the Federal University of Pará. And Belém is, of course, at
Unbelievable.
the mouth of the Amazon. And what's
Unbelievable.
wonderful is uh, there are about 500 indigenous students at the university right now. It's got the largest indigenous student population of any of the federal universities in Brazil. And we're working with them to try to develop a program so that they can actually have some resources and time to work with their communities, because they are typically the one person from their community that the community can send and can put at a university. So
Mm,
they're vital resources
absolutely.
for their communities, and they ask for some help. So we're trying to figure out a way to really support them to work in the Amazon basin more broadly. It's very exciting.
Fabulous. Well, we'll touch base again because I'll be going
Wonderful.
throughout that vast country. Thank you so much for the gift of your time, and I actually leave this exchange feeling a little more hopeful than before I engaged with you.
Hey, it's when we talk together, there's lots of reason for hope. So we're going to keep
Mhm.
pushing.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeff.
Great to be with you.
You too.
Thanks so much. Bye bye.
Bye.